Hello, friends, and welcome. I'm your co-host, Andrew Lazaga, here with Dubside.
And you're listening to the Dubcast with Dubside.
So, Dubside, what did you think of the interview with Warren?
Yeah, I listened to that just recently. Yeah, I was very, very enlightening. So he said I got in 10 minutes in Deception Pass, I had the equivalent of his 3 years there or something like that.
Yeah.
He's being awfully generous. I remember that I pulled that out of my log book this morning.
Okay.
And I looked at it. This is July 23rd of 2005. And so, yeah, we went out there, and it was an outgoing current. It was a pretty strong current, as strong as Deception Pass gets. And we were over where the whirlpools are on the far side. What impressed me is he knew exactly, all the little spots. He says, okay, right here, we have to paddle straight across as fast as you can. And then if you get to there, we can go back up. If you miss that, we have to, you can't get around that. If it's a point of no return. And so we tried to get across. We tried doing that, and we missed it. So we had to go around to Canoe Pass on the, around the island to the other side. And then you're zigzagging up there. The current's so strong. So some side you go on the left side to get up, and then you cross over to the right side. You drift back some, and you go farther up. And if you miss it, you have to come back around in a circle until you can get across. And you can wait a couple hours for the current to die down.
Yeah.
But otherwise, to get in there. So he knew all that little stuff, and it was kind of rough on the kayaks because the closer you stay to the rocks, the slower the current is. But the rocks are all covered with like nasty barnacles and stuff.
Yeah, they're
so
big barnacles.
It'll chew up, the big huge shell thing. So it'll chew up the end of your kayak. And I think I was a Feathercraft Whisper back then, and I took some real slashes on the back of the skin.
Oh,
on
no.
that thing. I later replaced that skin. But I remember he was taking duct tape and putting like a big huge end on both ends of his kayak. Because you're going to hit that against the rocks and trying to make those tight turns. And I remember not really being all that intimidating. If you got a solid roll, there's not that much to worry about. Like you said, it's not those huge whirlpools that suck you down and keep you down there and take boats and stuff. They dissipate pretty quickly. So it's not that dangerous in that regard. And actually, if you tipped over and had to come out of your kayak, you'd wash out, a mile down and out into the bay or something like that. But with a roll, it's like I wasn't apprehensive about that at all. It was no big deal.
Yeah, it's actually those rocks that scare me.
Yeah.
I remember when he got a big gash on the stern of his kayak, like 6 inches long, and he ended up sewing it up and putting some Aquaseal on it, and it was good.
Yeah. Well, so according to my logbook here, the next day we went out there, the Sunday the 24th. We were looking to where to shoot the rope video stuff initially. That day, the Sunday the 24th, you were there.
Yeah.
That's the first time I met you. You remember that?
Yeah, I remember. Tom had sent out an email just inviting people, to hang out at Deception Pass,
Okay.
and I decided to show up. So he had his camera out with his Merlin gimbal, and which was a brand new thing at the time. Mm-hmm. You guys were actually shooting some of the ropes moves there.
Yeah, we were starting on that. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And didn't Brian Schultz show up?
Yeah, I have Brian and Jackie. I don't remember who Jackie is.
I think Jackie was his girlfriend at the time. She did a lot of photography.
Okay.
Yeah, cool times. Warren didn't mention this in the interview, but he also worked with John Lockwood of Pygmy Kayaks.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay.
John Lockwood's daughter, Freya,
Freya,
who went to Greenland, and with the Freya, the kayak that John Lockwood designed for her. That was just this amazing rolling kayak. Warren taught her how to roll.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, at Deception Pass.
Wow. Cool.
So she picked it up, obviously, pretty easily.
Yeah. My latest big cool thing, I managed to locate a guy in Washington, D.C. who speaks fluent Greenlandic. He is the top diplomat working at the Danish embassy in charge of all the Greenland stuff.
Wow.
He was over here at my brother's house for dinner, brought his wife and his daughter and his office intern. And we hit it off like you wouldn't believe.
Wow, that's amazing.
He couldn't believe that he's here in Virginia talking to someone who's been to his hometown several times, who knows people in Greenland that he knows, who's up on Greenland history and Greenland culture. He's just The only thing I couldn't do was speak Greenlandic to him, not in full sentences, but
Wow.
he was quite impressed. So I'm going. I got the week after Thanksgiving. I'll go meet him at the embassy there for an hour and interview him for the podcast.
Wow.
Full this
Fantastic.
interview with him. And he said, "Oh yeah, you probably want to interview my wife and my daughter and everybody else. And you have to come over to my house sometime." I think, oh, he's totally hooked up because on the diplomatic angle, he's if there's like a security concern with what Russia might be doing, he has to talk to the people in the Pentagon about it because he's Mr. Greenland in the USA. And then for cultural stuff, they're showing some film or something like that. He's on top of that. Trade issues, the seafood importation and exportation, all that stuff. He knows all that stuff. So I can get from him the full up to date story of how Greenland is about to become a country and what the process is there and what stage they're at and all that stuff. He's on top of all that stuff. So he's quite a wealth of information. So I'm hoping, and it's probably very likely he'll be coming to Delmarva next year to see all what's going on there. And like he said, his kids, they've kayaked, but I don't think they've done traditional kayaking, and he hasn't really kayaked. But his wife owns a couple fiberglass kayaks in Kolkatok in Greenland that for the tourists to rent out.
Cool.
It's quite the good network there. So I'll have more to say about that in upcoming episodes. Yes. So I'm just hoping to plug him into the whole Kayak USA thing, and we can really have a mutual benefit. Yeah. So it's exciting stuff.
Okay. Well, great.
Well, on a totally non-kayak topic, we have episode number 49 here coming right up. Welcome to the Dubcast with Dubside. This is Dubcast number 49. The Fine Print. And this episode, like the one I did recently about what I eat for breakfast, is not an exclusively kayak-related subject, but I'm branching out. Also in the music department, I have another song by Nanook, my favorite Greenlandic band. When I was a very small child, I recall one situation where my father had to sign some piece of paper or something. And he looked at it very carefully before he put his name on the bottom. And I came away with the notion that you have to be very careful what you sign, and you have to pay a lot of attention to what it says before you put your name on the bottom. And there's another idea that I didn't pick up on at a very young age, but it is exemplified in the movie Hotel Rwanda. Even in the midst of genocidal violence, the main character at this hotel, Paul Rusesabagina, takes the approach that everything is negotiable. No matter what kind of demands or threats people make, you can always call into question some things and set some terms and make a deal, or at least try to. I will note that the Hollywood accuracy of Paul Rusesabagina's life has been called into question, and his life story has had some positive and negative chapters since the movie came out. There's still a bit of controversy. Rwanda is a very volatile place, but I'll let you look that up yourself. Well, these two concepts of reading the fine print and negotiating, I want to tell you how I applied them in some of my experiences. Well, attempting to make a living as a kayak instructor, I did not have enough money for things like health insurance until the passage of the Affordable Care Act. And after that went into effect, I qualified for being covered under Medicaid. Now, as we'll see, there's a whole lot of bureaucracy involved here. There's the Medicaid folks, the state insurance coverage, bureaucracy, whatever.
there's the actual insurer, and there's then the local doctor office place, and a lot of forms to fill out. Now, as a matter of general practice, people normally just put their name at the bottom and don't read through all the stuff. It would take so long. And the receptionists in these offices of these places generally expect people to not take very long to fill out the forms. But I found what you'd call some wiggle room here. There is no legal standard for minimum reading speed, so they can't set any limit on how long you want to take to read something. If it takes you an hour to get through the first page, they have to accommodate you. I've gone in for a doctor's checkup and haven't gotten through all the forms, and they've told me to come on in and they'll do the checkup, and then you fill out the rest of the paperwork later, which puts me in a very superior negotiating position because they've already delivered their service before I've agreed to anything. And trying to find a dentist, I was at this one office going through their paperwork, and there's just typos left and right. Things misspelled, phrases missing, punctuation wrong. And so I had more than a dozen typographical errors. After about 20 or 30 minutes of me sitting there, they sent out the office manager to ask me what the problem was. And I picked one typo. It was a grammatical thing. And I explained, I don't understand the sentence here. And it became apparent that this office manager, English was not her first language. Subtleties of English grammar were over her head. But I resolved that issue by walking out of that office. I figured if they're sloppy enough to have that many typos in their paperwork, how sloppy are they going to be when they get in my mouth working on my teeth? Well, here's an interesting loophole. Most people don't read all the fine print. And that includes not just the person signing the form, but the person who gives you the form to sign. Not only haven't they read it, they don't look at it after you give it back to them, which means that if you've crossed something out or modified it, they often don't notice that. At the second dentist I was at, I object to that phrase where it says in there, I accept full responsibility for the payment of this bill regardless of the insurance status. So if the insurance doesn't cover it, you're saying that you're the person they can come after for the money. And I object that that's signing a blank check. It doesn't say how much it is. It's just an open amount that you're indicating you'll be responsible for. Well, when I raised this issue at this one dentist office, the dentist himself was out, and he said, yeah, if it's under Medicaid, that covers it all. I said, okay. So he went back to work on somebody, and I filled out the rest of the form, and I wrote at the bottom of it before my signature, I said, I understand that Medicaid will pay all the costs. And then I stacked up the paper and gave that back to the receptionist, and she put it in the folder and probably didn't look at it. So if there's a problem down the road, I can have them pull out that form and says, no, I didn't agree to paying anything. It says right there, that's my understanding, that the Medicaid will pay it all. All right, so here is probably my finest moment, so far anyway. I was told by my doctor to get a colonoscopy. And that, of course, means a whole nother set of forms and another place to go and a bunch more bureaucracy. So I found a place that took my insurance. And went in, and the first appointment, they gave me some forms, and they gave me the rundown on the procedure, and they gave me the prescription for the stuff you have to drink to clean out your intestines. So I got through the forms. They weren't too bad. Figured maybe this will not be a problem. So the second appointment, after I drank the stuff, that stuff tastes awful after the first half a gallon. The second part is, but anyway, so I was all prepared. I had not eaten any food for the whole day or two before, and I go in there, and they got a whole bunch more forms to sign. So I sit down with them and start going through. And I'm making little notes about, it says that they've given me some statement about the risks involved in this procedure. I don't have that. It's something about the privacy information. I don't have that. It says I've been advised if there's any financial interest that the personnel have in the business or something, conflict of interest, something like that. I said, nobody told me about that. Then, of course, the cost, being responsible for the cost if the insurance doesn't cover it, I'm not interested in that. So time is going by, and they're saying, sir, they can't put a limit on how long it takes you to read something, but they can certainly try to rush you along and ask you what the problem is. So I tell them, look, you haven't provided this information about the risks involved and this and that. So they bring out some more forms, the privacy statement thing, and so I look through that. And then the time is running out for them anyway. So they bring me into the back of the room, out of the regular waiting room. And I've got the office manager standing to the right of me and the actual doctor who's going to perform the procedure on the left of me. And I'm showing them on the form, well, how about this, financial interest in the business operation? So that the doctor himself says, okay, yeah, I have part, I'm part invested in this operation here, and so yeah, he's got this excuse of it's very expensive equipment, and so the only way we can afford it is to have some. So I said, okay, you covered that. Then we have this issue of being responsible for the cost, and he says, well, it's very unlikely that the insurance wouldn't cover this particular colonoscopy, and if they wouldn't cover some of it, it's probably just a small amount. I said, well, what's a small amount? If he's a doctor, I imagine he's making a lot more money than I am, so his standard of a small amount is probably a lot different. So he wouldn't put a dollar figure on it. And so, and I said, look, I am not willing to sign off on being responsible for the cost of this. That's just not, it's not going to go. And so he looks over at the office manager and he says, well, if we let him cross that part out before he signs it, what does that mean? And she says, well, that means that you pay if the insurance doesn't. And he kind of sighs and goes, all right. And he lets me cross that part out. Because if he was part owner of the business there, that meant that if I walked away, he would lose money. They're all set up. This is an elaborate procedure. There's multiple personnel. And they're all expecting to be able to make some money for the next half hour or so from the insurance company. And if I walk out the door, they don't get that. So he had to blink first before I did. So he crossed that part out. So I get in there on the table ready to go. And then they've got the anesthesiologist comes out with a form and a pen in his hand. And I just gave him a look. And I think they had tipped him off, so he knew. And then he just puts the paper down, and I didn't have to sign that. So I negotiated, and I got it acceptable on my terms. Worked out pretty well. Well, sometime after that, my primary care doctor told me I should get checked out by a dermatologist. And maybe me telling you these things makes it sound like I'm in there negotiating and having a good time. But I just dread, another office receptionist, office manager, set of forms to fill out. Oh, what a nightmare. So I find a dermatology place that takes my insurance. And by now, I try to get to these appointments a half an hour early to give me extra time to read the forms. And if it becomes an issue later, I say, that's why I came in early, because I take more time to read all this paperwork. Well, the typos aren't too bad, minimal. But it does say that I've been provided with I think it's called the HIPAA, Health Information Portability and Accountability Act. It's the privacy stuff. So when it finally, the receptionist calls me and says, have you got the paperwork ready? I said, well, I haven't got this form, it says this HIPAA stuff. And so she doesn't have any, and her coworker has one copy, so they make a copy of it there, which tells me how many people have asked for this, which says that in every form it says everybody signs that they've been given that, but apparently nobody has. So I take that and sit down again and read through it. And it says in there, and I quote, our practice will post a copy of our current notice in our office in a visible location at all times. This is, I would imagine, what the law requires them to put in these forms. So I told the office worker that, I said, you haven't done that. It says here that you posted on the wall somewhere. And so she points to the corner and say, well, that frame thing over there. I said, no, that's your anti-discrimination policy. Nice try. You don't have this thing here. So they call the office manager, who's not in that day. So there's two people at the front desk, and they've got the office manager on the phone. And they're making all these excuses that finally the office manager says, well, we don't have it posted, but we give you a copy instead. And I said, well, that's fine, but it says right here in the paperwork, our office will post a copy, and you haven't done that. And she says, well, it's on the speakerphone. The office manager says, well, if you need more time to fill out the forms, we'll have to reschedule because the 15-minute slot for you to, that's already passed and we're running out of time here. I said, look, I don't need more time. I'm ready. But you just have to meet the conditions that it says in the form before I sign it. And they hem and haw some more. So finally I just said, sounds like I should be going somewhere else. You lose. And turned around and walked out. And just to do some research, I found out later that the Health and Human Services Department of the U.S. government, which is all this stuff is required under, has a procedure where you can report somebody for if they're violating the law. And the minimum fine is $127, and it goes up to many thousands if they really mess something up. So I could have gone back I could have filed a complaint, and then over time it might have cost them $127, but I didn't bother to do that. I found another dermatologist. So I made an appointment and went in, and this place, on their counter at the front desk, they had a little box with copies of their HIPAA statement, policy, whatever thing. So they've got that base covered. And so they get my name, and I had identification and insurance card, etc. And then they hand me a tablet, electronic pad thing, with a little stylus pen to sign. It's all electronic, so I can't cross anything out. And I'm sure everybody just grabs that, scrolls all the way to the bottom, signs their name, and hands it back to them. I said, I can't use this. You got to print this out for me. And then they one person asked the other person behind the desk, and they hem and haw a little bit. And then they print it out. It's like 7 or 8 pages, and they hand me that. So I go sit down and start going through that. So the typos are okay, and pretty much the only problem is the accepting financial responsibility for the payment of the bill, no matter what the insurance is, which it appears 4 or 5 times in all the paperwork that I'm filling out. So I go back to the front desk after some amount of time, and I said to the person, look, I can't sign a blank check here. It doesn't say how much this might be. If it's going to be $1 million, I don't have $1 million. And so she's joking. She says, I don't have $1 million either. I says, well, I can't sign it this way. So they say, this is the typical, well, we have to go to the office manager. So the office manager's name is Leslie, but she's not in. So they just dump it off on me that way. Oh, you have to talk to her. So I go back home and call up. It took me a week or so to get in touch with Leslie because I guess she was on vacation or something like that. So I explained to her the situation. I can't accept responsibility for the payment. I don't want to do that. So she says, she checks into my stuff, and she's, oh, you're covered under Medicaid. So apparently she used to work in a law office and knows, as a matter of fact, that they can't force you to pay under Medicaid. The insurance company can't force a Medicaid person. So somehow it would get reimbursed through the government, through the Medicaid, something like that. So she said, yeah, you don't really have to sign that. I said, all right, that's cool. We'll make a new appointment. So I next week scheduled a day to come in. And so that week I showed up. Might have been a different receptionist. I don't know. It was a busy office. So they hand me the tablet. I said, no, I've been through that. And I show them, here are the forms I had printed out last time. And I've got an issue with where it says to accept responsibility for the payment. But I talked to the office manager, Leslie. So I should explain here, as you could probably imagine, that all these dentists and doctors and everybody, they consult with lawyers. And the lawyers tell them, to cover yourself for liability, here's all the legalese that we're going to write out for you. Make them sign this form. Nobody goes through anything unless they sign this form. You turn them away if they don't sign the form, because otherwise you're not, all the liability comes into play. So they must sign the form, and that's drilled into every receptionist's brain. So they say, well, the office manager, she's not in today. I said, well, why don't you call her on the phone right now? So they go back in their back room there with their phone, and they come out, and their jaws are just dropping because she told them he doesn't have to sign the form, and they have never seen this before. And they're holding the form with their fingers shaking, like, he's not going to sign the form and we're going to let him come in. They can't believe it. Now, in all the paperwork, I did sign the part that said I agreed to a $50 charge if I'm late for the appointment, and the one I've been given for the privacy stuff. But all the stuff about accepting responsibility for the payment, I did not have to sign any of that. And I went in and saw the dermatologist, and it all worked out like that because I negotiated and I read the fine print. Well, my final story involves banking. And I had a bank account a long time ago, but it didn't have a local branch where I'm at now. And in trying to get a local bank account, I found a while back that they wanted proof of residency. And that would be either a utility bill in your name or a ownership of a place or a lease agreement. And I didn't have any of those things. I was traveling about half the year. I was staying with my brother when I wasn't traveling. I didn't have any bills in my name, so I couldn't get a bank account. Well, more recently, I was trying to transfer some cash, and I needed a cashier's check. And they said that you have to have an account in the bank to get a cashier's check. Well, where I'm at, there are these new banks that have sprung up all over the place called Truist, which I think is some amalgamation of some other former banks and restructuring. So at the Truist Bank, they told me, all we need is a letter with your address on it. Well, I can get that. That's not a problem. Well, it was actually the day I went to that second dermatologist. I brought with me, I had a letter from the IRS, that's official, and my ID and my social security number, etc. So after the dermatologist appointment, I found a Truist Bank nearby. I went in there and said to the guy, one of the little side desks over there, a little office thing, said, what's involved in opening an account? So he said, gave me the rundown, and I showed him I had this letter from the IRS. He said, yeah, that'll work. And I had identification, I had social security number, I had a phone number. And I told him I didn't do email, but he said that we could still work with that. So I had to sort through the various, the checking account, savings account, and different conditions on different things. And this one you have to have a minimum balance, and this one you can't withdraw more than 6 times every month or two or something like that, which isn't a problem for me because I'm not taking out money that often. So we get the one thing, and I think that they were going to charge me $2 every month because I didn't have email, and they have to send you the form, which it's kind of annoying, but they would much rather people just stop with the mail thing so they can use it electronically, but I don't play that. So he types in all my information in his computer, and then it comes out with this form, 1-page form. It's got printed my name and my identification stuff on the top, and then a couple paragraphs and things, and then sign at the bottom. But of course, I'm going to read the whole thing very carefully, just like the example I got from my father. Well, in about the second or third paragraph, it said, I've seen and agreed to the terms and conditions and have also been provided with the interest rate schedule or something like that. So I said to the guy, well, I haven't seen these things here. You haven't given me that. So he says, that'll print out. Once I get this all plugged in, you sign it, plug it in, then it'll just those things will come out. So I was on the verge of signing it. Took my pen out of my pocket, I like to bring my own pen for these things. But something just had me pause. And then I looked at him, I said, "Can you print it out first?" So he turns over to his computer, types a few things in. Well, it was 43 pages. Fortunately, his printer was fairly rapid. So he gets them all. He tries to find a stapler in his desk to put them, staple it together. He hands me 43 pages. Title page, 2 pages of table of contents, and the rest is small font, single-spaced. And I'm going to read the whole thing before I sign anything. So I look at my watch, because this is going to take a good part of the afternoon. Hadn't planned on that. So I start in on it. And the first couple pages, it talks about arbitration. In signing it, I am agreeing that all disputes will be settled by binding arbitration. Now, I happen to know that that is not nearly as fair as it sounds. The people who are the arbitrators are generally white males, and I'll have a lot less to do with selecting which one than the bank will if there's an issue. So that was a little, maybe not a red flag, maybe a yellow flag, maybe just a warning. But I mean, it wouldn't stop me from signing it, but it's just not too cool. So then I get the next thing talks about class action suits. And it says very clearly and repeatedly that no class action suits will be used to resolve any dispute. So I'm waiving the right to participate in any class action suit against Truist Bank. Well, I didn't like that. I mean, what are they afraid of? They can't handle a class action suit? And with 35 more pages to go, I reached out onto the desk and picked up my pen and put it back in my pocket. And the guy notices that and says, "So what do you think?" I said, "No deal." And I told him that I wasn't too comfortable waiving the right to any class action suit. And I said, "Look, 43 pages for a bank account? I mean, come on. That's ridiculous. I haven't got time to sit here and read through all that." So I handed him back his 43 pages, and he actually thanked me for reading them, the little bit that I did read of them, because I bet he had never looked at it and had no idea about the class action suit, and he was quite sympathetic to me. He understood my position. And I walked out. And those are some of my experiences reading the fine print and negotiating. And looking back on it, you know what I think I'm going to do next time? That thing about charging you if you miss an appointment, a $50 fee. I mean, I can understand that they're hurting if you don't show up. You know, time is money. But what if I show up and they're not ready for me? Whether if they've got a power failure or the doctor got injured or for some reason they can't go through with my appointment, but I've shown up for them, I think they should give me $50 for my trouble. So maybe next time I'll throw that into my negotiations. Okay, for the musical segment, I got my studio rewired here. The guitar amp, so we can rock out. I want to tell you about the coolest song by the coolest band in Greenland. And this is Nanook is the band, and the song is called Timmissat Taartut, off of their first CD, and that means Dark Birds. And so, like all great rock and roll songs, it's based on a great guitar riff. And so I think that the riff owes something to Foxy Lady by Jimi Hendrix, going way back to the 60s. So you have that. So that double note at the beginning. So this Timmissat Taartut takes it up to the key of A. So they're going. And so Nanook plays that riff, but they go a note higher. So we have a capo on the second fret of the guitar. So we're in A. And so what I find so cool about that riff is that when you play these two notes together, rather than just let them go, you bend them, and that kicks in that intermodulation distortion and just thickens the sound. So you hear how that opens up the riff there. So I heard that riff, well, I got the CD with that 2009, 2010. And then that summer, Nanook was playing in the big outdoor stage in Tivoli Amusement Park in Copenhagen, Denmark. And just hearing them in sound check play that riff off the stage just was so inspiring to me. It just rekindled my interest in music in general. I got very excited about that song. And so I can actually take you back to that moment. It wasn't the sound check. It was on stage that night. They came on to play that song, and I recorded it. Now I would play their actual version of it on CD, but I don't play their music on my podcast, respecting their copyright. So here I am in Tivoli recording them on stage, coming out. I think this might have been an encore last song. And it show you what that sounds like. Now, is that a cool riff or what? Actually, he hit the wrong fret there the first time he went through. But I guess we're all human. So when I went to make my own version of this song, I decided to change the riff a little bit, and just to do something different. And I can't sing it at that high key. I can't sing it in any key really, but to have a chance of trying to sing, I had to go back down to A. And so my version goes. And I instead of the distorted electric guitar, I use acoustic guitar. So here's my version of Timmissat Taartut.
Babani kerisut ganga teput inuna lango kipo Jimiganishte tipo iluni Sochdu da sahina utileso Timmissat Taartut sumut minni apirsi Nangua dasilepo Jakutinga Inunek nutamu English latinga Sila suhamu Kama suhamu Timmissat Taartut sumut minni apisi Nangu apu dasilepo Timmissat Taartut sumut minniäppisi Nanguapu tasilepo Timmissat Taartut sumut minniäppisi Nanguapu tasilepo
That is Timmissat Taartut. And as to the lyrics, they're just 2 verses and 1 chorus. And they're translated on the CD. And they say, the name of the song is Dark Birds. First verse, they are stiff as frozen up there. My life is altered again. My body is getting colder within, as if it is getting empty. Chorus, dark birds, where are thou landing? Our dear country is darkening. Second verse, please, please, little bird, show me, lead me to a new life, lead me to a brighter world. And the chorus is repeated, dark birds, where are thou landing? Our dear country is darkening.
Well, folks, that brings us to the end of another fascinating episode of the Dubcast with Dubside. Before we sign off, I want to take a moment to thank each and every one of you for tuning in. We really appreciate your comments, suggestions, and likes. Your feedback keeps us motivated and inspired to bring you the content that you enjoy. So please let us know what you think. You can email us at dubcastwithdubside@gmail.com or leave a comment on my YouTube channel. So until next time, this is Andrew signing off. See you on the next episode of the Dubcast with Dubside.